The rain came down in sheets that November evening. The kind that turns city streets into rivers and makes you question every choice that led you outside. But Sarah Mitchell wasn't thinking about the rain. She was thinking about the empty refrigerator at home, the overdue electric bill stuffed in her purse, and the way her daughter's face had looked that morning when there wasn't enough milk for her cereal. She was thinking about how quickly life can unravel, how a single medical emergency can transform a comfortable, middle-class existence into a desperate scramble for survival. Most of all, she was thinking about the word the bill collector had used on the phone that afternoon, delinquent. As if poverty were a crime, as if struggling made you less than human. She pulled her thin jacket tighter and hurried past the gleaming windows of restaurants where people laughed over $30 entrees, past the boutiques where a single dress cost more than her monthly rent. The contrast was almost unbearable. 6 months ago, she'd been one of those people, dining out without checking prices, buying her daughter new clothes just because. Then came her mother's stroke. The mounting medical bills, the impossible choice between keeping her job and being there for the woman who'd given her everything. She'd chosen her mother. The world had not been kind in return. The bus stop ahead glowed like a beacon, and Sarah quickened her pace. Just 20 more minutes and she'd be home with Emma, her 8-year-old daughter who was probably doing homework at their neighbor's apartment right now. Mrs. Chen didn't charge for babysitting. Thank God. Some kindnesses in this world were still free. That's when Sarah saw her. The woman sat hunched on the bench inside the bus shelter. And even from a distance, Sarah could see she was in trouble. Her clothes were soaked through, and her body was shaking so violently that Sarah could see it 20 feet away. But it wasn't until Sarah got closer that she understood the full picture. The woman was elderly, maybe 75 or 80, with silver hair plastered to her skull and skin so pale it looked translucent. Her lips had taken on a bluish tinge, and her eyes, when they briefly met Sarah's, held a confusion that sent ice through Sarah's veins. Hypothermia. Ma'am? Sarah dropped to her knees, ignoring the puddles. Ma'am, can you hear me? The woman's eyes focused with difficulty. I can't remember. Her words came out slurred. Where am I? Sarah's nursing school training, cut short 3 years ago when Emma was born, came flooding back. Confusion, slurred speech, violent shivering. This woman needed help immediately. Sarah pulled out her phone. But before she could dial 911, the woman's trembling hand caught her wrist. No hospitals, she whispered with sudden clarity. Please, I can't. The bills. I can't afford. Sarah's thumb hovered over the call button, and in that split second, she saw herself reflected in this stranger's terrified eyes. She understood that fear intimately. The fear of asking for help you couldn't pay for. The fear of adding one more impossible debt to a tower already threatening to collapse. The fear of being another burden in a world that had no patience for the vulnerable. But this was different. This was life and death. I'm calling for help, Sarah said gently, dialing. And I'm staying right here with you. As she gave the dispatcher their location, Sarah shrugged out of her jacket and draped it over the shivering woman, then sat close to share body heat. Her own shirt was soaked within seconds, and the November wind cut through to her skin. But she didn't move. The woman leaned against her, and Sarah wrapped an arm around her shoulders. What's your name? Sarah asked, trying to keep the woman conscious. Margaret, came the faint reply. Margaret Walsh. I'm Sarah. Help is coming, Margaret. Just stay with me. My purse, Margaret mumbled. I had a purse. Sarah looked around and spotted a worn leather handbag lying in a puddle several feet away. She retrieved it, water dripping from the seams. Inside, protected by a plastic bag, was a wallet with Margaret's ID, $17 in cash, and a photograph. The picture showed a much younger Margaret with a teenage girl, both smiling broadly at the camera. Written on the back in faded ink, Annie, 1998. Is this your daughter? Sarah asked, showing Margaret the photo. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. She died, she whispered. 7 years ago. Cancer. I spent everything. I had trying to save her. Everything. And when she was gone, there was nothing left. Not even enough for... She trailed off, her shivering intensifying. Sarah held her tighter, her own eyes burning. Here was a woman who had sacrificed, Everything for love and been left with nothing but memories and empty pockets. How many Margaret Walshes were there in the world? How many people were one catastrophe away from sitting on a bus stop bench? Alone and freezing, too proud or too scared to ask for help? The ambulance arrived in 8 minutes that felt like hours. As the paramedics loaded Margaret onto a stretcher, she reached for Sarah's hand. "Thank you," she said, and Sarah heard a lifetime of loneliness in those 2 words. "I'll check on you," Sarah promised, squeezing back. "I'll find you." The ambulance pulled away, lights flashing in the rain, and Sarah stood there shivering in her soaked shirt. Having given her jacket to the EMTs to keep Margaret warm, she'd missed her bus. The next one wouldn't come for 40 minutes. She was freezing, exhausted, and would be late getting Emma. But none of that mattered compared to the fierce certainty blazing in her chest. She had done the right thing. The next morning, Sarah called every hospital in the area until she found Margaret at City General. The nurse said she was stable but would be there for a few days. Sarah promised to visit. That afternoon, something unexpected happened. Sarah's phone rang with an unknown number. "Is this Sarah Mitchell?" a man's voice asked. "Yes." "This is James Walsh. You helped my grandmother last night. The hospital had your number from the paramedic report. I don't know how to thank you. They said you saved her life. That if you hadn't been there—" His voice broke. Sarah's throat tightened. "I'm just glad I was there." "How is she?" "She's going to be okay. But I need to explain something. My grandmother, she's been so proud, so stubborn. After my mom died and she spent everything on the medical bills, she wouldn't accept help. She moved into a tiny apartment, sold most of her things. I've been trying to get her to move in with us for years, but she always refused. Last night, she'd gone out for groceries and got disoriented in the rain. She has early dementia, but she won't admit it. If you hadn't stayed with her, anyone would have done the same," Sarah said softly. "No," James said firmly. "They wouldn't have. I've talked to the bus driver who passed the stop twice before the ambulance came. He saw other people walk right by her. You stopped. You stayed. You gave her your coat when you were already soaked. That's not anyone. That's someone special." After they hung up, Sarah sat for a long time thinking about those words. In a world that constantly told her she wasn't enough, wasn't successful enough, wasn't wealthy enough, wasn't important enough, she had been enough for Margaret. Her presence had mattered. Her choice to stay had saved a life. 3 days later, Sarah visited Margaret in the hospital. The older woman's eyes lit up when she entered. "You came," Margaret said, reaching for her hand. "I promised I would." They talked for an hour. Margaret told stories about Annie, about the life they'd shared, about the joy and the grief. Sarah shared her own struggles, finding in Margaret a kindred spirit who understood what it meant to sacrifice everything for love and face an uncertain future with courage. When Sarah finally stood to leave, Margaret pressed something into her hand. It was the photograph from her wallet. "I want you to have this," Margaret said, "to remember that love is never wasted. Even when it costs us everything, even when it breaks us, love is the only thing that really matters. You showed me that love still exists between strangers. You showed me I'm not alone in this world. That's a gift I can never repay." Sarah's vision blurred with tears. "You don't need to repay it," Margaret said firmly. "I do, not with money. With a promise. Promise me that when you see someone else who needs help, someone everyone else walks past, you'll stop. You'll stay. You'll be the hand that reaches out in the darkness. I promise." That photograph sits on Sarah's dresser now, next to one of Emma. Some mornings, when the bills pile up and the fear creeps in, when she wonders if she'll ever climb out of this hole, she looks at those 2 pictures and remembers. She remembers that humanity isn't measured in dollars or status. It's measured in the moments when we choose to see each other, really see each other, and decide that another person's life matters more than our own comfort. Margaret lives with James and his family now, in a sunny room where she can see the garden. Sarah visits monthly, and Emma comes too, calling her Grandma Margaret. On cold November evenings, when the rain comes down in sheets, Sarah sometimes thinks about that bus stop, about the choice she made to stop and stay, about how a single act of kindness created a ripple that touched more lives than she could have imagined. She still struggles. The bills haven't magically disappeared, and life remains a daily challenge. But she carries something now that poverty can't touch. The knowledge that she is capable of profound goodness, That when the moment came when a human being needed help, she was brave enough and kind enough to give it. That's the truth they don't tell you about kindness. It doesn't fix everything. It doesn't pay the rent or fill the refrigerator. But it does something more important. It reminds us who we are beneath the struggle. It proves that even when we have almost nothing, we still have something invaluable to give. Her, the word Margaret's son used. Someone special. Sarah finally understands. We are all her or him or them, the ones who stop when others walk past, who stay when others leave, who give when they have almost nothing left to give. And in a world that often feels cold and indifferent, that choice to care for another human being is the most radical, revolutionary act of all. It's what makes us human. It's what makes us whole. It's what saves us all.